Well, let's continue our discussion of scattering by looking at scattering cross-section. The scattering cross-section is how big a target looks to an incoming wave. So the target is what gets scattered off of, and what comes in is a wave or a particle. In some instances, we consider the target to be extremely heavy and unmovable. In other instances, we consider a recoil from the target. And in yet still other instances, we consider the target and the incoming wave to be similar in mass and momentum. If the cross-section is a description of how large the target appears to the incoming wave, then we can get a good classical grasp of really what it means. For example, a billiard ball of radius big R. It has a cross-sectional area of pi r squared. That means if you sliced it down the center here, you would have a circle of area pi r squared. And so that's how big the sphere appears to be to an incoming. And the particle might go right past it if it is farther than r away from it. The scattering center only appears to be as large as pi r squared. In quantum mechanics, we have waves incident, not just little pebbles bouncing off of billiard balls. So we might look at a probability density incident on a scattering target. So think of a beam of particles, say, for example, an electron beam heading towards an atom. The incoming wave function is a plane wave, e to the ikz, which I discussed in the video on spherical waves. It is incident on the target and it scatters outward. The probability that it is found in these regions off of the incident axis is non-zero. So now we have wave function way out here, and hence we have probability current way out here. The mathematical description of that scattered beam will be different. It's no longer a plane wave, it is now a spherical wave. And I need to define some geometry in this situation. For example, we'll have the r vector, which a scattered particle is going to follow. And theta is the scattering angle of the wave, and it scatters into a conic section. We say we put a detector out here. A detector has area ds. The scattered wave then sees another scattering cross-section, the detector of cross-sectional area ds, which is just r squared, this r vector, times the differential solid angle that detector subtends. The wave function psi is related to the probability current J through the expression that was covered way back in chapter 2 of Griffiths. I might point out a few things. First of all, J is a probability current. It has dimensions of particle flux, that is, particles per area per time. If you have multiple particles present, or if you just have a wave present, then it has dimensions of per area per time. In most practical experiments, you have a lot of particles incident, and if we call dn the number of particles that pass through a given area in a given time, in this case the area will be the area of the detector out here, then dn is the probability current density of the scattered wave times the area of the detector. And that area being r squared d omega gives us a nicely packaged equation for the number of particles per unit time that are incident on this detector out here is the scattered probability current density times the area of the detector, r squared d omega. Conservation of matter certainly implies that there has to be a relationship between dn in the scattering space and dn in the incident beam space. And dn in the incident beam space, you can write as the incident current times something called d sigma, the scattering cross-section. The number of particles per unit time arriving at that detector of given size being equal to the incident probability current times this yet to be defined d sigma defines d sigma, the scattering cross-section, how big the scattering target appears to be to the incoming beam, but not the whole target, rather the part of the target that is able to send the incoming probability current into this detector. How large does that part of the target appear to be? We'll work in azimuthal symmetry, that is this phi coordinate which goes around, it's like the hands of a clock going around the target, traces out the phi coordinate. We'll take that to be isotropic, that is, there's no phi dependence. And so we'll talk about this scattering area as a ring going all the way around the target, and the ring has area d sigma. Now, the target itself is a lot smaller than the detector out there. This ring on the target that corresponds to d sigma has a corresponding ring on the detector that has area of this radius squared times a differential solid angle. We won't just look at conic sections coming off of the target. We'll look at the entire annulus because of the azimuthal symmetry of the scattering problem. So the ring has a scattering cross section of d sigma. The entire target has a scattering cross section. If you add up the d sigmas for all of the rings you divide the target into, you can get the total scattering cross section for the target. It's convenient to, instead of saying integral d sigma, say integral d sigma by d omega, where d omega is an element of solid angle that gets subtended by the scattered wave. You can rewrite d omega as 2 pi sine theta d theta, right? There's phi independence, so it's just 2 pi sine of theta d theta. And the total scattering cross-section for that target is 2 pi times the integral of what we're going to abbreviate as big D sine theta d theta. D sigma by d omega is called the differential scattering cross-section. And it's usually what we end up looking for because then integrating over solid angle is just a mathematical exercise. Although we have azimuthal symmetry, that is this phi coordinate, the angles traced out by the hands of a clock on the scattering target is independent. There's a very strong theta dependence. I'll illustrate theta. Here they have the incoming beam, it hits the target, and it scatters off at an angle theta. Certainly the scattering is not isotropic in theta. There's going to be preferred values of theta, and there will be values of theta where there's very little scattered beam. And that's incorporated into the scattered wave function by multiplying the spherical wave, e to the ikr over r, by a theta-dependent function. And f of theta has dimensions of length so that the scattered wave function has the same dimension as the incident wave function. In the end, we're going to want to add them together to find the wave function everywhere to the right of the scattering target. Let's find the probability current density using the expression that goes way back to chapter 2. We have the wave function that has to be differentiated. Let's do it separately for the incident direction and the scattered direction. Using the incident plane wave, we'll find the incident current density, and it will be with an arbitrary factor in front because there is a constant coefficient that goes in front of the e to the ikz, which we're going to leave out because it's going to cancel in the end. So the incident probability current density is found by differentiating the wave function and simplifying, and it's simply h bar k over m, k being the wave number, typically 2 pi over lambda for the incident wave. M is the associated mass of whatever that goes with that wave. If it's an electron, there's the mass of the electron. If it's an electron in a crystal, then it would be the effective mass of the electron. Now, the scattered wave also has a probability current density, and putting that wave function in where we have this theta-dependent prefactor in the wave function, we have to carry that through, generally complex. So we can do the algebra and calculus on that, and it simplifies down quite a bit to h bar k over not m, but mr squared times this theta-dependent function. That's the probability current for the scattered wave. You can see how it drops off as 1 over r squared, where r is how far away you are from the scattering target. I would like to make one comment about the dimensions of the wave function, because we left out of both of these expressions a dimensional factor, which shows up in this probability current. After the scattering has taken place, these two wave functions just add together, and they have the same thing in front of them, which kind of serves as normalization. You can't really normalize a plane wave, but I showed in the spherical wave video how the plane wave expression is related to spherical waves using the Rayleigh formula. And I alluded to the normalization of plane waves by confining the geometry of where the plane wave is. But you really need to write a plane wave as a coefficient times e to the ikz, where that coefficient has dimensions of 1 over length to the minus 3 halves, since it's a three-dimensional wave. And we're going to ignore it because it will cancel in the end. That same a can be put in front of psi sub scatter as well, right in front of that F. So I have a question about the dimensionality of the probability current density. In looking at the expression, h bar is dimensions of angular momentum, kilogram meter squared per second, and you have kilograms in the denominator. And then inside the big parentheses, we have psi star, which has dimensions of 1 over length of the 3 halves, and then d psi by dr, then which would be 1 over length of the 5 halves. Altogether, you have 1 over length squared seconds. That's per area per time. And that's what probability current density is here. It's the probability per unit area per unit time. And the same dimensions apply to scattered and incident. So we should be able to equate the probability current, the densities of which are found in those red boxes. So take those probability current densities, multiply them by the corresponding areas, and equate them. They should be equal. So the scattered probability current density can be multiplied by the area subtended by the detector. The incident probability current density can be multiplied by the corresponding area in the target that sent the particles into that detector. They have to be equal, so make them equal and put in the expressions we found for the scattering and incident current probability current densities. Simplify by canceling like terms, and we can solve for this mysterious f of theta function and realize that it is d sigma by d omega, which we previously called big D, the differential scattering cross section. So the mod squared f is simply the differential scattering cross section, the physical meaning of which is it's a probability distribution. It's a probability distribution for scattering into the angle theta. It's not normalized to 1, though, so don't mistake it for probability. It's normalized to sigma. But otherwise, the differential scattering cross-section is the probability distribution for scattering into theta. Those are some basic definitions of scattering. Let's illustrate them in the context of something real, like Rutherford scattering. In Rutherford scattering, 2 charged particles interact. So if I have, say, a negative charge in 2 places, and this negative charge is incoming, the other charge is the scattering target, and for now we'll take it as being big and heavy so it doesn't really move. In comes the lightweight negative charge. It's going to get close to this big negative charge and feel a repulsion and scatter into an angle. The same illustration can be made for opposite charges. It's just then this scattering will be downward instead of upward. I'll define a little bit of geometry in this situation. First, there's the point of closest approach, R min. The closest these 2 particles get to each other when they scatter. There's the scattering angle, which is the tangent for the scattering trajectory. Then there's the distance of the incoming particle above this dashed line, called the impact parameter. Previously, when I showed you a pebble bouncing off of a billiard ball, the pebble missed the billiard ball, and it just kept going. Now, if there were electrostatic charges, there would be deflection no matter how far away they are from each other. And so the impact parameter is an important metric for determining how much deflection you're going to end up with. For example, if you have a larger impact parameter, you can expect less deflection. I couldn't really draw this very well in PowerPoint, but the point of closest approach is always along this line. For this green curve, reflecting a larger impact parameter, is going to have less scattering, and we'll say dB is the difference in impact parameters between these 2 curves. So this upper curve is maybe not very different than the lower curve, a differential amount farther away, and it's going to have a correspondingly smaller angle. We'll call d theta the difference in the scattering angles between those 2. Now, Rutherford scattering is a classical problem and is treated in classical dynamics textbooks. In fact, I would simply refer you to one, for example, the book by Thornton and Marion. Almost any classical mechanics textbook will treat the problem. The scattering angle in this case was derived in that textbook. I'm not going to do it here. You can get it by integrating from this point of closest approach out to infinity. Now, if you work out that integral, you have an expression that relates the scattering angle to the impact parameter. And with a lot of algebraic manipulation, it can be put into this form. So this is something we're going to work with right now. In the case of Rutherford scattering, the impact parameter and the scattering angle are related in this way. A fairly simple relationship given the integral that had to be solved for it. E is the energy of the incoming particle. Take a really close look at the scattering target. Again, we'll divide it up into rings because of the azimuthal symmetry of a scattering problem. dB is the thickness of that ring because if I have a particle incident at the ring, it has an impact parameter of b, and so the radius of that ring is b, and its thickness is dB. I'll even divide that ring up into azimuthal chunks, dphi, but we'll make that go away ultimately by recognizing the symmetry in the phi direction. The area of this darkened region is radius times the differential radius times the differential angle, because b d phi is that arc length. So that arc length times the thickness of that segment is the area of that segment. So b d phi dB. Any bit of wave that enters that blackened area will scatter into a solid angle d omega, which in general is written as sine theta d phi. Now, if you take the ratio of these two expressions, you have a derivative. You have the scattering cross-section d sigma by the scattering solid angle d omega. The phis conveniently cancel out, and the expression b over sine theta dB by d theta. I put the absolute value signs on there because d sigma by d omega has to be positive. That is, if you increase the solid angle that detector subtends, you certainly are increasing the amount of the target that is sending wave into that detector. That means dB by d theta, whether it's positive or negative, we need an absolute value on that. In fact, dB by d theta is going to always be negative, as we'll see right now. By differentiating that expression we had on the previous slide for b as a function of theta. Taking the derivative, you have this expression, that's always negative, but we put it inside of the absolute value sign, so put it in there. And this was our expression for b from the previous slide, divided by sine of theta. And so now we have an expression for the differential scattering cross-section in Rutherford scattering. Well, simplify all that stuff down, get something much more compact behind this annoying thing that's always there, the differential scattering cross-section in Rutherford scattering. So if I were to integrate that over 4 pi steradians, I would get the total scattering cross-section. That is, I would find out how large the scattering target appears to the incoming wave. Quite frequently in Rutherford scattering, the incoming wave is a particle beam, for example, a proton beam, and the target is typically an atom in a crystal lattice, and the scattering is useful for determining both the charge and the mass of the particle. When we add complexity to this problem by considering the recoil of the scattering target, we can determine the mass of the scattering target. We will revisit Rutherford scattering later in a quantum mechanical context because this was classical. We'll incorporate the Born approximation later and come up with a quantum mechanical description of Rutherford scattering. For now, we'll stop with this classical treatment, but look at this expression. There should be one thing that looks out of place here. Do you notice that the differential scattering cross-section does not depend on the impact parameter? Let's give a little thought to where that impact parameter went. Why is it not in the cross-section expression? Just logically, why is it not there? Remember, the meaning of cross-section is it is how large the target appears to the incoming wave. You throw 2 billiard balls together, they don't have different sizes depending on the impact parameter. They either hit or miss. So how large that target appears the incoming wave has nothing to do with where the wave is. So impact parameters should be gone in this expression, and it certainly is. But it's conceptually important to recognize why impact parameter is not in this red box. Okay, we'll come back later and look at this quantum mechanically.